But first, the Premier was very impressive yesterday when it seemed that the family of the 13-year-old girl who was shot as part of the gangland war that's been going on in Sydney's West on Monday night, weren't helping police. The belief was that there was a wall of silence, and it was because the Premier basically waved his finger in the direction of the family saying, come on, if your daughter gets shot, please help the police. He has no sympathy for the family if they don't. Well, they did step up and they ended up speaking to police, and now we read tales this morning about how they are very afraid of their safety. Well, the whole point is that there is a way you can protect yourself, which is if something like that happened, you tell the police everything you know and you ask for protection, and they'll give it to you. It mightn't be there for the rest of your life, but geez, it should be there for as long as possible, and hopefully that means till the danger rolls over. But the wall of silence, we see it with bikies and we see it constantly with this gangland nonsense that's happening in Sydney, where we waste time, money and effort on people whose parents say, oh, he's a good boy, and they don't bother reporting it, or people whose homes get shot up, not even telling the police, where they were at the time. This wall of silence needs to be broken, so how exactly do we get on top of it, and how do we actually blow a hole in this wall? Stevens is a former New South Wales police officer and a gang crime specialist both in Australia, Asia and in the US. We've spoken to him before and he's back today. G'day, Brett.
Oh, g'day, Paul.
How do you get through the wall of silence? Because it's either a wall of silence that's going to be built out of fear of a reprisal, or it's just the way the network works, which is if all else fails, no one squeals.
Well, it's a bit of both. So let's just look at it this way first. It's the culture. The whole in-gang culture is even celebrated, not so much the bikers, they usually don't have music sung about them, but if you look at the American gangs, they have a lot of music and their gang culture songs are about not being a buster, about not informing. I can get shot, I don't tell anybody, I don't talk to the police. So that culture overlays on the community. That culture is obviously overlaying on the community in Australia in regards to the bikie gang. So that's a culture. Then you look at the people who get shot around them. Many of the guys involved would look at that as collateral damage. And also the people who are in this culture as well, if their family members are part of it, they better start recognising that they can be collateral damage as well. We often hear about a bikie getting shot and also the girlfriend getting shot, so we have got to understand that process. How do we defeat it? Well, we defeat it by basically busting the gangs and being on top of the gangs and showing the gangs that it's not in their best interest to be part of the gang, such as what they're doing in Queensland. You'll get more people ready to step forward. If you don't do that, it's very difficult to, believe you're going to get people wanting to step forward and going, yes, I'll put my hand up and make myself a target.
Yeah, because to me it seems like if you leave any wiggle room in the law or the prosecution of that law or the implementation of that law via the courts, then people will ultimately say, well, what's the point in stepping forward? Or they think they can get around it. I mean, up in Queensland, what is amazing is that up in Queensland, they've said minimum 6-year jail term if you're associated with a gang. But of course, the legal fraternity up there is whinging because it takes away judicial discretion. I thought all of us were interested in busting as many gangs as possible.
Well, you'd think so. But having said that, if you look at a lot of immigrants who come here from these very hard places, and when they've come forward, they give evidence against the gang member, but then they see them taken to the police station, fingerprinted, and then released and bailed. And they go, obviously that doesn't happen back in their own country, but here it happens. And so that is a major issue. What you're sending a signal is, we're putting them back out into the community until we can sort it out all in the courts. That is something to consider. And if I was someone coming from a very hard place, Middle East or somewhere, and I've stepped up to the plate, got that guy taken off the street, to see him back on the street within a couple of hours or a couple of days, I would have misgivings about continuing to help the police.
So this is what becomes difficult. So do you think that it's about a suite of laws? Do you think it's about extra cops? I mean, how do we take that next step to saying, all right, game over?
Well, the police are going to essentially have to become the biggest gang, and they may have to expand that unit, that anti-gang units, to have basically the muscle to be able to take these guys on, intimidate them, make them afraid. I mean, this is what they're all about. They're all about intimidation, making people afraid. They get off on it. And being part of this gang, you've just got to make it very... the community is hostile to the gang culture as opposed to, living with it.
Now, how do you get on top of also this scenario where there are parents, and the accusation in the first half of yesterday was that the parents were not willing to play ball with police, even though that their daughter, even though the son was the target, the daughter ends up copping the shrapnel, but they didn't want to speak to police. They've said this morning it's about fear, but the Premier was very much of the belief, as many of us were yesterday, that it was because they were part of the culture, that you see this time and time and time and time again. Mum, dad, auntie, the family that should be, grabbing them by the scruff of the neck and taking them to the police station are the very ones who want to say, shush, 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 nothing to see here.
Well, also, you've got to look at they could be benefiting from their association with the gang. Their son's been in the gang. I mean, the guy's probably not got a job. The gang's his job. He gets income from that. He helps the family. So there is possibly, I'm not saying in this case, but but often there is a benefit. They set their families up in nice homes and, holidays and cars. So there's a benefit there, and they are sort of basically associated with the gang culture.
Yeah, and this is why my colleague Jason Morrison, who does the Drive Show, often speaks about how we need to also involve things like the tax office. So to turn around and say, okay, so last year you said you earned this much money, but you're driving a pretty fancy car. How the hell does that work?
Oh, absolutely. I remember a conversation. I ran into an ex. I used to work at King's Cross. I ran into an ex-drug addict at a bar, who was now a member of one of the bikie gangs, and he was telling me how great it was, and how much money they had, and life was great. And so you need to go after the money. You need to go after their houses, their cars. You can't just walk in with the muscle. You need to come in with that accountant, and that will scare them.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that says, no, this is going to hurt you. This is really going to whack you, which is we're going to take away your plasma and all the rest of it. Brett, nice to talk to you, mate. All the best.
Nice.
Thank you. Brett Stevens there. He's the former New South Wales copper and gang crime squad specialist.